we really don't know. So I actually recorded a short video on this topic on what exactly is learning. I want you to have a look and then we will proceed further because it connects back in several ways to the topic that we have taken. Just go through this video. It takes about 5 minutes. Hello, this is Prakash. Welcome to the next edition of Coffee Times Success Nuggets. There are many people who seriously come to me and say that I've learned a lot from this video. I've learned a lot from your session. Life has taught me a lot. We all make this common mistake of not being able to differentiate between what is knowledge and what is learning. Knowledge is available in plenty. You can go to the internet and find it. You can read it in books. You can watch videos. You can listen to audios. You can watch sessions like this, even one on one. Yet, we might never actually get to learn. The unfortunate rote memory system, as we have been put through from our schooling days, predominantly in many sections of the world, makes us believe that we have learned actually something, whereas we have just acquired a little bit of more knowledge. We have transferred what is on paper into the empty cells of your brain, nothing more, nothing less. Would it really be useful? It's like as good as having shifted a set of seeds from a shop into the basket that you have at a home, but never actually putting the seed into the ground for it to germinate and grow. The same is true for all of us. When you actually say that you have learned, what does it actually mean? It's a pretty lengthy process. The only way in which actual learning happens is when you put that knowledge into practice, you experience it. You do it a number of times where literally it becomes now part of your subconscious process or what we call as literally your reflex or what you would call as a muscle memory, where you don't even have to remember what that learning is by looking up at a book, or when someone asks you a life lesson, you don't need to say, oh, strategy is this, tactic is this is how you plan, this is how you live life. The moment you have to recall, the moment you have to look at a book, you have to look at a manual, it's no more something that you've learned. It is still a external box that you're referring to, even if it is inside your brain. True learning happens only when you are able to actually internalize it by experiencing the learning, and in all probabilities, the learning will continue to stay with you permanently when they are aligned to the short, mid, or long term goal that you have. It also involves a unlearning process. Many people think that unlearning means to forget what I have learned from the past. That, in fact, would not be the right way to look at it if you ask me. Ideally, unlearning is nothing but a process of removing habits that don't work for you anymore. What worked for you 5 years back, 10 years back, in making you progress towards your chosen goals, objective dreams of life, which don't actually anymore offer you any help. The ability for you to drop off, the way in which you have to drop off some weight when you climb a mountain, when lightness is essential for you to reach the top of the mountain. Likewise, you should be able to unlearn by dropping off habits that do not suit you. Why do I have to drop off habits? For a simple reason. Habits is what consume your time throughout the day. And if you have habits that don't align with the goal that you are walking towards to, these are the ones that you have to unlearn. You don't need to forget them. You just know that these habits, these knowledge that I had earlier, which I had been practicing, is of no more use to me. I just let it go because it doesn't help me to move towards my goal. And seriously speaking, you have to pick up new habits, which is what learning is about, which aligns to your goals and objectives of life. Be ready to unlearn those habits, rote memories, and practices that don't henceforth align to the goal that I have. So far, so good, I have reached. Like what Swami Vivekananda once famously said, what has brought you till now will not take you any further. Drop it off and move on. Hence, the next time when you say, I've learned something, be very aware that learning truly means that you have experienced it, you have internalized it, and that learning is in alignment with your personal, professional, social, or spiritual goals. Something to think about. Keep sipping your coffee till we meet again in the next edition of Coffee Times. Success. Yeah, can you just take to the chat box? You watched a video on what actual learning is. And I had shared some thoughts recently in one of the forums, which I thought I'll play and then start with, because many times we all keep on adding to the memory of our system, but really it never converts into a practice and hence it never becomes a learning. So if you have a few thoughts to share on the video that you just watched, kindly feel free to go to the chat box. I'll give maybe a minute or so for you to share before we move on to today's session is quite well packed, so we need to really be quite fast at the chat box. Can I have a few responses on the video that you have just now watched on learning, what learning is? Are you able to access your chat box? Yeah, good. Mr. Jiva says nothing is a learning till you have experienced it and internalized it. Quite well said, Mr. Jiva. Without implication of learning, there is no use of learning. I think what they are meaning is implementation of learning. That's what Dr. S.T. Naidu says. Implementation. Yeah, I understood, sir. Okay, I'll do one thing. I'll just take you to the topic itself. I have a question to all of you. Building relationship and effective leadership. All of you are leaders in your own way because you are helping shape the lives of so many people. You are literally the factory which manufactures good students who go on to become the leaders of a company, a state, maybe even the nation. So hence, why is it important to build relationships? Because obviously building relationship and effective leadership are intertwined. Why is it important to build relationships? Would you mind getting into the chat box and sharing there? Can we have some responses there, please? Why is it important to build relationships? To feel connected. Okay, that's what Dr. Ravishankar says. Building relationship is like making world is in our brain. They act as our support system to fulfill duties, to progress, to have happiness. Good. Do you see a link between building relationship and effective leadership? If you see a link between building relationship and effective leadership, or you believe they are two different topics? We have moved on to the next question. So, what is the link do you see between building relationship and effective leadership? Strength of a relationship and building skills can affect your ability. That's what Mr. Mukesh says. Dr. Ravi Shankar says the impact of communication. Good relationships gives good thoughts. Okay. connect with our vision as a leader, okay? So Jiva says both are different, okay? Seemingly different or actually different. Understand each other's pain points, okay? I wanted to share one very famous quotation on behavioral science here, which will sort of set off the discussions that we are going to have, deliberations we are going to have here for the topic building relationship and effective leadership. People do not care how much you know till they know how much you care. Finally, we are all people with feelings and emotions. It is famously said that even assuming that I give you an entire palace like Taj Mahal or anything else, and you don't get to meet anyone inside the palace and you have to live alone, will you be happy? In all probabilities, no. Man is known as a social animal. Without people, we are literally nothing. Even the saints or the yogis who sit somewhere in Himalayas, occasionally they do have their own disciples who come and meet them, or at least they have a relationship with their own God who is inside. When it comes to this definition, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care, is something which I have understood long ago in my own life. Whenever I've taken sessions, when it was all about showing off the knowledge that I have, I had very less connect with the people who are actually part of my session. So 25, 30 years ago, I learned that before I even start any session, there has to be some kind of a emotional connect or a bonding. So normally what I do, at least when I meet people in a session, is even before the session starts, while they're having breakfast or while they're having a cup of tea or coffee, I just go around, talk to them, get introduced, shake their hands, uh, find what is that which actually interests them or impresses them, why they are here, and things like that. When I do that, and then when I come and start a session, I have always found that the people receive me better. In case I don't have the luxury of talking to them prior to the session, what I normally do is when I take up the podium or when I start doing a session, I at least either in a local dialect or in some way find some humor or find some story with which I connect to the audience, by which actually I put them at ease. And when they know that actually I'm here because I care for them, they start listening better, they start interacting with me better. See, we all have this funny thing called as ego. Ego is both negative and positive. It's a force by itself. Like a nuclear force, ego is also a force that you need to learn how to use. If you use it for productive purpose, it's something which is going to be extremely useful. If you're going to use it for destructive purpose, it's going to obviously not be useful. After all, the atom bomb which was triggered in Hiroshima and Nagasaki was by a decision made by the president of US then. I think it was Roosevelt. His ego told him, okay, go ahead and do the bomb, drop the bomb on Japan. By itself, the bomb would not have exploded unless by accident. It's finally the people who make things happen. And hence, effective leadership, while there are other parameters which pertains to performance, which pertains to financial gains, which pertains to better marketing and selling, or which pertains to running an education institution better, finally, the fulcrum of all this lies on one single topic called as your ability to build relationships. In fact, if you are a tyrant and if you are going to run the show only by sheer brute power, it's only a question of time before people throw you. Look at even our own Dr. Abdul Kalam. I don't think anyone called anybody in India separately and say that, go on mourning or do this for your leader. It was a spontaneous act because over a period of 25, 30 years of his public life, He had touched the hearts of every person whom he had come in contact with. In some way, even if you hadn't met him in person, this is what you will find. This is what is true with many of the masters of caliber who form part of the spiritual system. In some way, they touch the hearts and even the soul of the disciples in some way where there is some kind of a bonding which develops. Successful leaders, effective leaders are those who will never ignore the human aspect of their role as a leader. This quote is just to set the context. I wanted to just share a few areas where one has to be strong before they can be considered accepted as a leader. I have deliberately taken out the performance aspect out of that because, in my view, performance, which is what actually makes an organization or even personal life more successful, is a byproduct of some of these parameters being implemented. You will invariably find that performance happens as a byproduct when you implement these things. You cannot have performance as the focus. You cannot have top line, bottom line. You cannot have number of college admissions in a college as a measure and ignore these points. In fact, in many of my leadership sessions, I tell leaders that the human side, all these 5 points that I have put there on the slide, they are all the human aspect of how you interact with the hearts and the mind of the people who are part of your team. And though there is no specific sequence in which is first, which is second, I have just listed them and let's say deliberated each and every one of them. And you will find that when you're looking at building relationship using these tools, with or without your knowledge, without you having to exert yourself to be an effective leader, because these 5 qualities, what I have listed here, are fundamentally qualities of the heart and qualities of common sense. All you have to do is just do them as if you do with a family member. And this is what exactly happens. Recently, I was reading a report of the best 100 companies to work for in the world. And when I read the list through, the first 10 or 15 of them were not really the big names that you would expect to be on top of the list. They were not the number one in terms of turnover, but they were the number ones as rated by their internal stakeholders or employees. And repeatedly, many of the people who had rated their organization as the best organization to work with had voted based on the principles of human relationships. There is a famous quotation in HR circle that we always share. People don't quit an organization, they quit their bosses. The same would be happening in the college or in the university that you're working to. There are people who would flock to a certain professor, an assistant professor, or a lecturer, or a VC, or whatever. And there are certain people they would desist even meeting. Fundamentally, one research says that before people quit the organization, actually, 3 to 4 months prior to that, they mentally quit the organization. And what we have as exit interviews in many of these organizations repeatedly prove that one of the top 3 reasons for people to quit an organization is their inability or lack of compatibility with their immediate reporting boss, authority, supervisor, whatever you want to call. I don't mind working for this organization, but I will not be able to work under this person. This is something that we have repeatedly found on several occasions in our own life, in our public life, in our official life, where finally lack of interpersonal, proper positive interpersonal relationship causes a lot of stuffs to happen. In my own interactions, I coach a lot of corporate executives across several spectrum of industries. Whenever I get into coaching and then I get close to the people who participate as part of the coaching process, one of the first point they always open up once they get comfortable with me is I have a lot to do for this organization, but I am not able to do. So when I ask them what is stopping you from doing, invariably they just say that my boss doesn't listen. I hope that if he listens, we can do a far better turnaround of this organization than what is currently happening. In fact, listening is considered to be so difficult yet so easy. Let me share one short video and then let's see what the context of listening is. Just give me 1 second.
Let's define listening as making meaning from sound. It's a mental process, and it's a process of extraction. We use some pretty cool techniques to do. Let's define listening as making meaning from sound. It's a mental process, and it's a process of extraction. We use some pretty cool techniques to do this. One of them is pattern recognition. So in a cocktail party like this, if I say, David, Sarah, pay attention, some of you just sat up. We recognize patterns to distinguish noise from signal, and especially our name. Differencing is another technique we use. If I left this pink noise on for more than a couple of minutes, you would literally cease to hear it. We listen to differences, we discount sounds that remain the same. And then there is a range of filters. These filters take us from all sound down to what we pay attention to. But that's not all. Sound places us in space and in time. If you close your eyes right now in this room, you're aware of the size of the room from the reverberation and the bouncing of the sound off the surfaces. I said at the beginning, we're losing our listening. Why did I say that? Well, there are a lot of reasons for this. First of all, we invented ways of recording. First writing, then audio recording, and now video recording as well. The premium on accurate and careful listening has simply disappeared. Secondly, the world is now so noisy with this cacophony going on visually and auditorily. It's just hard to listen. It's tiring to listen. Many people take refuge in headphones, but they turn big public spaces like this, shared soundscapes, into millions of tiny little personal sound bubbles. In this scenario, nobody's listening to anybody. We're becoming impatient, and the art of conversation is being replaced dangerously, I think, by personal broadcasting. We're becoming desensitized. Our media have to scream at us with these kind of headlines in order to get our attention. And that means it's harder for us to pay attention to the quiet, the subtle, the understated. This is not trivial, because listening is our access to understanding. Conscious listening always creates understanding, and only without conscious listening can these things happen. A world where we don't listen to each other at all is a very scary place indeed. I believe that every human being needs to listen consciously in order to live fully. Connected in space and in time to the physical world around us, connected in understanding to each other, not to mention spiritually connected, because every spiritual path I know of has listening and contemplation at its heart.
Yeah, can I just take to the chat box to share what you felt on watching the video on listening? It's a short video, but it was quite powerful. It gave the list of filters. What are the challenges we have in listening? Why it's essential for us to listen? Would you mind taking to the chat box to share a couple of thoughts if you have on the video that just now you watched on the importance of listening as a leader? Conscious listening creates understanding. Very good observation. Yeah, without understanding, there's no relationship, correct? Listening is actually very important in life because never have we been taught about active listening. Perfect. What Puja ma'am saying is perfect. Kannan Punuswamy, he is saying that if you want, I'll enable. Oh, that's okay. They can unmute and talk if they feel like it. Perfectly fine. Or they can use it in the chat box also. Decision depends on listening. Exactly. Without listening through, where the question of really listening. See, let's move to the next. How many of you actually even ever take? Because whenever I bring up these five topics in my leadership sessions on specifically leadership, effective relationship, things like that, when I speak about compassion, there are people who have bluntly told me, specifically in corporate world, that compassion has no place in business. In fact, there are people who have very clearly said compassion is a wrong tool because this is exactly what stops people from doing, because they get away with literally, as they say, even with murder. But these are the same people, when I talk to them in private, and when they have done a mistake or when they have not fulfilled an obligation, they are the ones who actually speak exactly the opposite. I don't know why management is not being compassionate towards me. Why is it so difficult? After all, this is a very small mistake. This is exactly what happens in the world. We want everybody else to understand what our problem is and be compassionate. But when it comes to others not fulfilling their obligations, we are literally ruthless. I just want to share a very short video on compassion for you to understand the concept behind it. One second. What is compassion? Why compassionate leadership is essential? I have two short videos, which both of them are, in my view, real excellent. One second.
Today, we're talking about compassionate leadership and how you can be a more compassionate leader. So let's get into those details. Hey there, and welcome back. Alex Lyon here. This channel is all about helping you as a leader develop. And to do that, we're in the second video of a 4-part series on compassion. And I want to talk about compassionate leadership today. There are lots of benefits to this. Employees will feel more loyal and committed. They're less likely to leave. They'll work harder when they know their leaders care about them. So yes, we're mainly talking about compassionate leadership because it's the right thing to do, in my opinion. But ultimately, this does benefit the leader in the long run. So the bottom line for me is that compassionate leadership is good leadership. Let's define this again. Compassion is care, kindness, especially the tendency to think about the needs and the good of others. To me, it's a state of mind, a state of emotion that drives us to act with kindness toward others. And we're going to talk about 4 ways that we can lead with more compassion. This is especially tailored toward the workplace. So number 1, you can help your people develop. So as a leader, you may realize that the people you lead are really under your care. Your followers need your help in lots of ways, and you're there in many ways to serve them. So part of your job as a leader, maybe the most important part, is creating a culture where your people can thrive. They can become the best version of themselves. In contrast, some leaders think it's all about them and everybody's there to serve them. But I don't agree with this philosophy. I agree with Robert K. Greenleaf. He wrote a lot about servant leadership. And he said that the servant leader, the compassionate leader, thinks that they are there first and foremost to serve the people who are under their care. So I had a boss once years ago who made sure that her followers were getting lots of training, professional development. She was putting them on interesting projects to help us all grow. We were all frontline workers, really. And we could tell that she cared about us because she was helping us develop. And through that development, she was improving our situation for promotion or future marketability for even other jobs at other organizations. She was looking out for us as whole human beings. John Eldridge, another writer that I really admire, and I'll paraphrase, he said the key question for leaders is, how are people doing under their leadership? That's what we should ask ourselves. That's the measure. Are people growing? Are they developing, maturing, and thriving? So I think one of the most compassionate things a leader can do is to help his or her people develop. Now, you also can do number 2, which is help people solve their problems. Now, you don't do it all for them. You don't solve their problems for them, but there's a connection here between empathy and compassion. Empathy is how you put yourself in the other person's shoes. And by doing so, you can identify with what their problems are and then step in to help them solve their problems. You don't solve it for them 100% as a leader. You don't want to get into that. But there's an article I'll link to by the Rafi Park website about empathy and helping other people with their problems. And generally it says that the compassionate leader will see that it's part of his or her job to support people in solving their problems. So one of my supervisors over the years saw that I was getting really burned out. And he encouraged me to take a proper vacation, to really unplug and get some rest so that when I came back, I wasn't burned out anymore. So he didn't solve my problem for me, but he looked for a way to help me and support me through that potential burnout phase. So as a leader, you can see other people as whole human beings, and then you can help them with the challenges that they may face as they come up. The third way you can be a compassionate leader is through your compassionate vocabulary. We should prioritize compassion in the way we talk. Words matter a lot more than people realize. There's a concept called vocabulary of motives that Kenneth Burke made well known. And he says, when we talk, we reveal our motivations. In some companies, for example, all they talk about are words like profit, sales, market share, production, territory, competition. My friend once worked at an organization, and at a meeting, his boss said that he hoped the competitor's building burned down. And if it did, he would dance on the ashes. He actually didn't say the word dance. It was much more vulgar than that. But the way we communicate, our literal words and phrases, our vocabulary, reveal our motivations and reveal how we feel about other people. And if it's one-sided like this, you're not creating a system of meaning that values compassion. So in contrast, when we speak about treating people with kindness, helping others develop, looking out for the best interests of other people, then we are introducing an alternative vocabulary of motives that prioritizes and promotes compassion. I'm making an entire other video on communication and compassion, and we're going to get into that in more detail. It's the next video in this series, and when it's done, I will post to it in the description below this video. But the short version of that video is that the way we express ourselves should be laced with compassion. The fourth way that we can lead with compassion is to cultivate compassion through action. Make it part of the culture to be compassionate. So great workplaces do this, usually by putting their people first. They have a people first, their employee first philosophy. So Wegmans grocery store is a well-known example of this. They put their people first. I have some relatives who work there. One of my relatives worked there until her late 70s, and she was working part-time toward the end of her employment. And as she got older, she couldn't work as many hours or as hard as she used to. But what they did was they gave her easier jobs and they let her go part-time. Now, a lot of places would have put the bottom line first. They would have encouraged her or forced her to retire, but they never even reduced her pay. And she had been working there for over 30 years. So she's per hour, she's making a lot of money by then. But Wegmans cares about their people. They had compassion for her because they saw that she really wanted to keep working for social and relationship reasons. So Wegmans treats people with compassion. They're not treating them like robots. They're not treating them like they're just a line on a spreadsheet. And when you treat people well, they treat other people well. They treat customers well. There's like ripple effect. So as a leader, you can take actions like this and over time create a culture, an environment where compassion becomes the norm. So question of the day, do you know any compassionate leaders? I would love to hear about those leaders in the comment section below the video.
I'll play one more video back to back from a spiritual perspective. This is from one of the spiritual leaders, Tibetan spiritual leader of the world. Extremely powerful one.
You refer to, I can't remember which book, but you talk about deep listening also. which book, but you talk about deep listening also.
Deep listening is the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of the other person. We can call it compassionate listening. You listen with only one purpose: help him or her to empty his heart. And if you remember that you are helping him or her to suffer less, and then even if he say things full of wrong perceptions, full of bitterness, you are still capable to continue to listen with compassion, because you know that listening like that with compassion, you give him or her a chance to suffer less. If you want to help him or her to correct his perception, and then you wait for another time, but for this, the time being, you just listen with compassion and help him or her to suffer less. And 1 hour like that can bring transformation and healing.
So I love this idea of deep listening, because oftentimes when someone comes to you and they want to really vent, they want to purge whatever is going on inside them, people start talking and giving advice. So if you allow the person just to let whatever those feelings are to come out, and then at another time come back to them with your advice or your comments, you would experience a deeper healing. That's what you're saying.
Yes, the fear, the anger, and the despair is born on the ground of wrong perception. And we have wrong perceptions concerning ourselves and the other person. And that is the foundation for conflict and war and violence.
You've said that the only way we can begin to end war is due to communication between people.
Yes. And we should be able to say like this: dear friends, dear people, I know that you suffer a lot. I have not understood enough of your difficulties and suffering. It's not our intention to make you suffer more. It is the opposite. So please tell us about your suffering, your difficulties. I'm eager to learn, to understand. You have to start like that, loving speech. And if we are honest, if we are true, they will open their heart and tell us. And then we practice compassionate, deep listening. And during the process of deep listening, we can learn so much about our own perception and their perceptions. And that is the best way, the only way to remove terrorism.
Terrorism, or even difficulties between yourself and
Yes.
family members or friends.
Yes.
And the principle is the same no matter the conflict.
Yes.
Terrorists, anti-terrorists,
Yes.
father and son,
Right.
yourself and your boss,
Right.
yourself and your children, your best friend.
Yes.
We watched two important videos on compassion. One from a business perspective, where how we can be compassionate even in business situations. And we look from a spiritual or a holistic perspective, where how compassion can even overcome problems related to conflicts, wars, terrorism, and things like that. And compassion as a value added to listening has a huge impact in building bridges with our own set of people. Please take to chat box. We'll have about a minute for you to share your views on what you believe is the importance of compassion as an effective leadership tool to build good relationships, working relationships with the people around us. Kindly take to the chat box to share your views on compassion. Someone says this is a superb thought.
So, can I just speak out rather than writing it down in the chat
Yeah,
section?
feel free, please.
So, when you listen to somebody compassionately, then probably they think that you understand them, even though you understand them or not. But it is important for the other person to think that you understand them, and then afterwards, when they completely went out, when the guru said, as like he said, when he completely went out and he thinks that now he's calmer, then you can probably change his perception if they are wrong, and that way it will be easier to make the relationship, whether it's a professional one or the personal one.
Correct. Good observation.
Thank you so much, sir.
Anybody else wants to share something, either through chat box or through voice? You can unmute, talk, and then you can mute yourself later. I am flexible on time, so it's not an issue. To have deep listening and develop people and help people to solve the problem. Yes. See, today, world over, if you really look at it, the world has enough brainy people, brain which creates, which also destroys. But what we need is what my guru calls as heart-based leadership, which is full of compassion, ready to listen to people. Even many of the simple issues like saving of a failed marriage or a failed relationship is much easier when you practice listening and compassion. So I will take you to the next point, which is about empathy. We all know that all these are qualities which are essential but not always very easy to practice. So I have another very powerful video that I have kept for you to have a look for empathy. Let me go to that and then 1 second.
In this video, Dr. Brené Brown tried to explain what is the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy drives disconnection, while empathy drives connection. Sympathy is basically remaining within the boundaries of my belief system and just go at the edge of it and check what is happening, but keeping the same perspective of my belief system. I basically do not connect with this external environment. While empathy is literally meaning to step into the shoes of the other person, when I directly connect with the other person to enrich my understanding from the perspective, the belief system, the feelings, the perceptions of the other person. I go beyond my own boundaries to embrace the value system, the perspective of the other person. It doesn't mean that I keep that it is good or bad or that I judge it. But now I have enlarged my understanding with this access of information. Researches from neuroscientists DCT and Lamb are suggesting that human beings are hardwired for empathy. And that was supported by the discovery of what we call mirror neurons. That's whatever we would see or behavior or action that someone would do, that will fire the same neurons and brain circuitries within myself. Daniel Goleman described this phenomenon of mirroring the behavior of the other person as the brain tangle. But at the same time, it can have some risks, which is empathetic distress. Because if the person is experiencing something negative, I will reproduce within myself these negative feelings and emotions, which can affect my physical, mental, and emotional health. Of course, the more I become self-aware, the more empathy becomes a choice, where I have the capacity to detach myself from the empathetic distress and turn a situation to my advantage so that I can feel better and better dance with that relation with the other people. To go further, now I would like to invite you to watch this interesting video from David Eagleman.
The video that you just now saw is by Mr. Stan. He is actually a heartfulness trainer and is also an international speaker specifically pertaining to empathy, listening, and those kind of skills. So I'm going to share one very short 2-minute video on how you can practice empathy on your own. You see, I've created a lot of awareness. And you may be wondering, without a tool to practice, is there a way out? What is the point? You have just created awareness. I'm just going to play a very short video. Have a look. This video is also available for you to view later if need be. 1 second.
Seeding positive thoughts. Sit comfortably and close your eyes. Imagine the form of the person in front of you. Have the thought that this person is my friend and well-wisher. Think that all negative thoughts the person has about you are going, and thoughts related to your welfare have been infused in them instead. Whenever you have the opportunity to go near the person, gently and subtly pay attention very indirectly to their face, without staring. When you breathe out, have the thought that particles of your love and affection are entering their heart. When you breathe in, have the thought that you are pulling all the negative thoughts they have about you from their heart and throwing them aside. Initially, this task may seem difficult, and you may feel resistance. But if you are courageous, it will become easy as you practice it.
What I want to do is, most probably you might not have practiced while this video was being played. So I would play this video again. It's a very short video, about 1.5 minutes. Kindly close your eyes. Bring a person with whom you want to strengthen the relationship further. Keep your eyes closed, and as the instructions are being played out again, the same video that you watched, see if you're able to practice those instructions with that person with whom you would like to deepen, strengthen the relationship. Just watch, let's watch this video once again and practice it parallelly.
Seeding positive thoughts. Sit comfortably and close your eyes. Imagine the form of the person in front of you. Have the thought that this person is my friend and well-wisher. Think that all negative thoughts the person has about you are going, and thoughts related to your welfare have been infused in them instead. Whenever you have the opportunity to go near the person, gently and subtly pay attention very indirectly to their face, without staring. When you breathe out, have the thought that particles of your love and affection are entering their heart. When you breathe in, have the thought that you are pulling all the negative thoughts they have about you from their heart and throwing them aside. Initially, this task may seem difficult, and you may feel resistance. But if you are courageous, it will become easy as you practice it.
Any thoughts on the practice that you just now saw? If you have practiced it and if you felt anything about that you'd like to share? It's a very simple technique that we normally teach people to develop relationship. Very good. Someone says felt light. Good. Okay, let me take you through two more points on leadership areas on human relationship, which are essential for you to build effective relationship and become an effective leader. The fourth point in the list, we have looked at listening, we have looked at compassion, we have looked at empathy. We are going to look at building mutual trust and respect. Typically, this is not exactly the meaning out of a dictionary that I want to share, but I want to share something which is more two-way applicable. When it says mutual between me and others or me and the other person, when you're talking about trust here, whether it's in family, whether it's in a educational institution, whether it's in a corporate organization, we are speaking about trust from a perspective of my interest being taken care. Let me just give you a definition of what trust is. Trust is defined as when the people around me, I take it for granted with certainty that all the decisions takes care of my interest. Imagine your boss is deciding something. Imagine that your spouse is deciding something. Imagine that someone in your family is deciding something. Imagine that your government or your institution is deciding something. If you have this feeling that without you even being asked, you are very certain that your interest is being protected, what more can you ask? Is it a very euphoric idea? Is it a very ideal stuff to work towards? So maybe, but isn't that what life is all about? Whenever I've spoken about interpersonal relationships, I always draw a lot from family. All the values that you have seen here till now, listening, compassion, empathy, are stuff surely we have experienced and we continue to experience in the family front. After all, in many organizations, they say that we work like a family. But do they actually have the values of a family being used or implemented? If they do, many of the interpersonal issues, it has been scientifically found out that many organizations are capable of producing 2x, 3x, 5x the current results that they are producing if each and every member of that organization feels and gets treated as if they are truly a family member of that organization. Maybe utopian, maybe something that we believe is only bookish, but I have seen organizations, I have helped organizations create cultures, including Heartfulness Institute, where we all work together. We all know with certainty that whatever happens to a great extent, our interests are protected. And hence it brings the best out of us in whatever we do, because there is no peer pressure. There is no lack of belief in what you do. Nobody questions or judges you on what you have done. There is absolute freedom. It's like if you're playing a sport, you are asked to do whatever you believe will help the team, and we'll go with what you do. And if you do and nobody questions you, in fact, they come back and praise you even when you have made a mistake. Like the recent cricket match where India got bundled out in the first match for 36 runs. The team stood together, and then what they did in the subsequent three matches has gone on to now become history. The same way, trust. When I know with certainty the other person weighs my interest in mind before deciding or doing anything, the same is true for other person. They also believe that when I do something for them, I have taken their interest and their other factors into mind before taking a decision. Things are done. And trust to be built also calls for presence of respect. And what do I mean by respect here? For example, in your organization, somebody has done a mistake and you want to go and tell them that this is a mistake that you have done. In many organizations, people will think twice, thrice, four times, five times. Sometimes they will not even speak up because of the chances of negative consequences. Mutual trust and respect here means when you have a reason to believe that something could have been done in a better way, you must have the freedom to walk in into anyone's place or room, maintaining all basic culture and etiquette, share with them that what they have done is wrong and this is how it can be done better. See, look at many of the problems that our country faces. If only people were allowed to express things freely, maintaining the basic dignity without sort of demeaning anyone, and if they can respect, if they can communicate that without the fear of a backlash. For example, I come to you or you come to me and say that Mr. Prakash, the session that you did was not up to the mark, and I take it in the right spirit, so I look at how to correct myself instead of going after you, telling the organizers that this person is wrong, they did some mistake, ensure they don't get the certificate or things like that, which means I'm actually taking revenge or coming back at you. which does not foster mutual trust and respect. In many of the organizations, I have helped them to really employ effective human skills, which leads to effective leadership skills. We have allowed people to talk freely, maintaining basic decorum and dignity, yet share a difference of opinion. That's why they say a true leader is one who can maintain two, three different views without being pulled by any of the view, which means he's able to look at two, three different paradoxical inputs without being swayed by any single input, and yet be sensible and grounded enough for him to take the right decisions. If you look at the four values that we have seen till now, listening, where I feel that my point of view is being heard and understood. Compassion, whether you do something right or wrong. I know with certainty that as long as the intent is proper, even in an organizational setting, people will understand what I am doing and they'll be compassionate towards what is happening to me. The third thing, empathy. People will always find a way to look at my point of view without being judgmental. Point number four, having mutual trust and respect, where I know with certainty that what I need the most is already taken care of well by the organization or the family to which I belong. And if there is a gap between what is expected and what is happening, I can go out and communicate freely without having the fear that it will come back to me like a backlash. The last point, which is critical for any organization's financial and other successes, is the ability of the leader to motivate. Motivation comes from a Latin word. If you look at the root of the words or etymology, it comes from a Latin word which literally means to move or to maintain force. Why do we need to move or maintain force? Because when a person has to perform, they are moving from point A to point B, meaning they are in their current level of accomplishment. You want them to move to the next level of accomplishment. And for them to do it, they need to be motivated, which means you have to maintain a positive force. It's like an object which is remaining stationary. There is some kind of an inertia which sets in. It's up to you as a leader to find positive ways in which you can motivate your team to move. In one of the olden styles, they'll call it as a carrot and stick policy. Of course, those stuffs are outdated these days. It's like when you want an animal, one of your pet animal, a dog or a cat or something to do something, after that specific act, normally you will give them a biscuit or some kind of a stuff so that it knows there is a reward at the end. Whereas motivation is something beyond that, but I'm giving an example for you to understand. So if you look at these five qualities, which are extremely essential for you to build relationship and be an effective leader. I am not speaking here directly about how to get work done. I am not speaking directly about how to make people perform, but I am talking about creating a beautiful field which is fertile, which is well tilled, which is now ready to take the seeds that are going to be sown. If I don't do that, whatever I do with the seeds, it will not grow into a proper tree. Whereas if we create the right land and the right environment with the right watering, it will go on to become a tree of the best caliber that it is said to become. So there are five qualities that I wanted to share, which are essential for you to become good in effective relationships and be effective leader. To listen, to be compassionate, to maintain empathy, to build mutual trust and respect, and motivation. Now I want to go to my last slide, which I had specifically written to share a few random thoughts, which in some way would connect back to the topic that we have. I have about six or seven quotations. Each one I'll briefly explain or rather share my perspectives. The first one, if you are keen on maintaining relationships, do not speak words you do not want to hear yourself. I have seen many people just because they are the supervisor or they are the boss, they are sometimes very harsh with the choice of words. But please bear in mind, as it is famously said, spilt milk, lost opportunity, shot arrow, lost time can never be taken back. And you can add to that spoken words. That's why it's famously said, you're only master of the unspoken word. This is a very famous quotation of Mahatma Gandhi in his book that he wrote, where he speaks about his ability to communicate. And he says, He considers himself good in communication and he says why. He says, no unthought word shall escape my pen or my tongue. No unthought word shall escape my pen or my tongue, which means he weighs every word that he either speaks or writes, the consequences it's set to create, what is likely to happen before he actually even speaks or talks or writes. Imagine what kind of control you would have on the words, because words can actually motivate people, words can kill people, words can make people to jump off the cliff. It can also make people to take wings and fly to higher heights. So be choosy of the words you speak. Think two, three times before you speak what you speak. The next one, my boss doesn't listen. This is something that I already shared earlier. People have always told me whenever they don't perform or when they're seen as non performers, they always come back and say that I have so many ideas to make my performance or happen or make this company grow better. But unfortunately, my boss has 2 ears and one mouth, but he doesn't want to listen, but he keeps talking all the time. So give more chance for people to talk. Listen more because that's the best way for you to get into the heart of any person. Because when you listen, they open up and share all the perspectives. It also gives you lesser chance to make mistakes when you talk. Because when you're listening, obviously you're not going to talk, which means you're going to say things lesser. To that extent, you are safer. The next one, there's a famous statement in English which says, character is what you are in the dark. Many times we all behave in a specific way in public forums or when we are being watched. That's why I use the word monitored and unmonitored responses. For example, when you are driving in the morning, the traffic is heavy, you have to rush to a place somewhere quite fast, but you're stuck in a traffic jam, you are there and you see a red signal. Skipping the red signal will make you go faster, but there is a policeman watching there with a challan, traffic challan book in his hand. Will you skip the signal? In all probabilities, no, because this is called as a monitored response syndrome. Whenever we believe we are being watched or when we know that somebody might know what we are doing, that's why a recent survey says that in many of the places across India, wherever they've installed security cameras on the road, in fact, robbery and thief and so many things have come down by almost 60, 70%. There is no person present. Just one single camera is sufficient to deter crimes from happening. Unmonitored response is what you are to yourself when you are free to do anything you want without anyone watching you, or you believe you are not being watched. Of course, in a spiritual sense, it is a fact that we are being watched all the time by the God or the Creator or by a Guru or whatever you want to say. Hence, they say character is what you are in the dark. One rhetoric question for you to think: when you have traffic signals and they are working, why would you need a traffic policeman to stand in the traffic junction where signals are there? In one of my recent trips to Europe, much before the pandemic, in one of the countries, I never found one single policeman in any of the signals. So I asked the local people, how was this possible? He said, we also had a similar challenge. Over a period of time, by rewards and punishment and education and things like that, we have brought it to such an extent today that we have a combination of measures in place, and now it has now become a subconscious practice. People value obeying law, and I am not talking about daytime. Even late in the night, when we were driving back from one place, and the entire road was empty, but he stood at a red signal. He said that's what a red signal is meant for. I asked him, wouldn't someone come and jam you from behind? He said, no, it will never happen in this part of the world, don't worry. And it never happened while I was there. I was surprised. So, is it because that we don't worry about our character, or is it because that we worry about our character only we are being watched? Something to think about. If everyone starts obeying what has to be done, imagine what a better place the world will be, including the relationship that we want to build with people. I had another situation when I met one of the corporate executives. He said he was going to quit the job, and he said he gets another job with a higher pay. So I just put a hypothetical situation to him. He said that starting from tomorrow, your pay will be doubled, in the same organization, and you don't have to do much. Every day in the morning and once in the evening, throughout the day you're free, you don't need to work at all. Once in the morning and once in the evening, in front of everyone, your boss will curse you. That's the only job you have to do, nothing else. He thought about it for a few minutes. He said, no, sir, I don't want that pay increase at all. He said, why? He said, for me, the respect is essential. I don't mind getting a lower pay as long as I am respected for what I am as a human being. So we all value relationships. If somebody is to slap you in front of everyone, even if they are your superior, would you accept just because they are a superior? You will not, because our self-esteem, our ego is equally important. So great leaders know ways in which they actually ensure that the ego of their people, their feelings of their people are always well taken care of. When you put together a good set of people, you inspire them, you motivate them, you empathize with them, you listen to them, you are compassionate, you maintain trust and respect, and you are able to literally be their sort of what we call as a fall guy. When they have an issue, they can come to you, talk to you freely, and they know that even if you don't solve the problem, they have a person to whom they would listen. They will go ahead and do whatever is essential for your organization to succeed. Of course, your core competencies of doing whatever you need to do is still essential, but uh, being a better human being, being in better relationship is always a better way of being a leader, is what I intend sharing here. The other point I always say is I am always attracted by people who maintain what they call as class conversations. What do I mean by class conversations when it comes to building relationships? See, we are all well read, we are all literate, we are all educated, but many times the conversation that we have with the people normally stoops down many times, specifically when they are in private. We speak about world politics, we speak about stuffs that people are doing, and we speak about them in a way in which normally we will not speak in public. Imagine that every word that you speak is being recorded and played back to your children. Imagine that every word that's being said out by you is going to be recorded and shown live in TV. What kind of words would you choose? Class conversation is always a hallmark of any great leader. And the last 2 points, which I share before I leave it open for a question answer session. Always communicate twice. This is the success behind many of the leaders. When I say communicate twice, I'm not asking you to repeat what you are saying. It is always said that before you speak anything, beginning to end, what I want to say, including its impact, has already been run through in your mind once. Preferably, you have done a role play in your mind or you have visualized how you are going to speak and present. Because when you make a presentation, you don't make a mistake. For example, the presentation I did 2 days ago and the presentation that I'm doing today, I have run through the script mentally quite a few times. That's why I'm able to go fast and there is no stutter or whatever, because end to end, every word that I want to say, or at least the overall picture, has already been practiced by me in my head many times. And while doing that, I weigh down the impact of the words that I'm going to speak will have on the people who are going to be there. Would it be positive? Would it inspire them? Would it make them feel better? Would they make them improve their self esteem? And would they be valued as a human while they interact with me? These are all points which I mentally communicate to myself before I actually open and talk in any forum. Though I have about 3.5 decades of experience in this field, I never leave it to chance when it comes to communicating with people. I always practice it at least once inside before I actually come out and share it open. The last point, practice excellence in whatever you do. And if you're asking what is excellence, I always say exceed the expectations of everyone every time in whatever you do, specifically when it comes to human relationships. If you are able to practice this, find out what the expectations are from the people and find whatever you need to do to exceed those expectations. If you follow some of the inputs that I've shared in this session, I'm very sure that building relationship and being an effective leader becomes literally a child's play. With this, I would put it back to the forum for you to ask any question answers. We have another 5-10 minutes before we wind up. I've shared even the last session's PPT with the faculty. They should be sharing it with you. This PPT, what I have, will also be shared with you a little bit later. So right now I would throw it open for question answers. Any
So,
interaction?
if what can be the difference between compassion and empathy? We have talked about the definitions are more or less same for the both of them. So, what would be exactly the difference while making an effective leadership or maintaining relationship? What would be the difference between both of them?
You can say that empathy is the founding stone through which you are able to be compassionate. Because empathy is when you're able to step in and understand the other person's point of view. And compassion is when you actually exhibit, you not only understand their point of view, but you actually exhibit or do something to make them feel good. Like you're going to a place, somebody has fallen, and you empathize, you know they have fallen. Compassionate is when you also give them a hand and then say, okay, it looks like you have fallen, you may not be able to walk. Can I take you to a clinic or can I drop you at home? And don't stop there. Maybe after a day or two, you call them back and talk to them. These are things which you can say that compassion is empathy in action.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I am free for any other questions, either through chat or through voice. Give another 2-3 minutes. If it's not there, we can wind up the session. You can raise your hand or you can unmute yourself to ask if you have questions, please. Like what I said the earlier time, all these videos that I've shared today are available in public domain. You can look at search with YouTube with the strings, what we have seen. Of course, this recording will also be made available through my YouTube channel later. Over to you, team. In case there are no questions, you can go into the formal closing down session.
Dear participants, if you have any questions, please ask. Otherwise, we'll close the session.